الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد, I'd like to begin by saying jag är glad att vara bland mina syskon i Sverige. Thank you. Would you like me to continue in Swedish or English? Swedish? Okay, we're done. That's it. That's all my Swedish. Fantastic. Thank you all for coming. And it's good to be with you here. This is my first time in this city. I've been in Sweden 3 times. And this is my first time in this city. And it's so much nicer and better than Stockholm, isn't it? Yeah. I was lying. Stockholm's better. So, we're going to be talking about the Islamic Golden Age. And a lot of times when you discuss this topic, it gets a bit boring because, oh, we used to do this, and we used to have brains, and we were scientific, and we were caring about education, and so it just becomes like a talk about the past tense. So, inshallah, for this lecture, we want to look at, because the golden age of the Islamic empire, it's estimated that it began in the 8th century and went all the way to the 12th century. So that's actually a long period of time. There were a lot of developments and a lot of discoveries and a lot of inventions, and it's really, in 45 minutes, to try to cover all of them in a short period of time isn't really possible. So what we're going to try to do, inshallah, is we're going to look at what are the things that brought about the Golden Age. What caused people to be so much into science and into studies and education and so forth. And then we're going to take a brief look at some of the discoveries, some of the developments, and also what caused them. Because, for example, these Muslims in this time period we're talking about, they were not afraid to borrow and to take the works of other cultures and build upon that and advance that. And then we'll conclude with some of the theories as to why there was a decline in the Golden Age. So, the Golden Age now, we said it was about the 8th century, and this is during the reign of the Abbasids. So this is the Abbasid dynasty. And the Abbasids, as you know, they had overthrown the Umayyads, and they moved the capital of the Muslim empire from Damascus to Baghdad. And there, they made it an intellectual center. They started to bring knowledge from all parts of the world into Baghdad. They established something known as Bayt al-Hikmah, which we can translate in English as the House of Wisdom. And there, they brought works from all parts of the world, and they would translate these works of science and philosophy and literature and so on. And they would bring translators to translate these works. Okay, but the first question is, what made the Abbasids so interested in knowledge? And many historians will tell you they were just following the basic encouragements in Islam that encourage seeking knowledge and education. The first verses were revealed were Iqra, which can either mean read or recite. Either way, it's encouraging learning and encouraging education. So the encouragement for that was already there in Islam, and the Abbasids were just going with what already existed. We know that the Prophet ﷺ stressed the importance of education. After the Battle of Badr, as an example, the captives, the Prophet ﷺ gave some of them the stipulation that they can go free as long as they teach 10 Muslims to read and write. Now, for the Arabs, if you were captured after a battle, before Islam, there were only 2 choices. 1, you're enslaved for the rest of your life, or 2, you're killed. That's it. And Islam added other options, and that is ransom. So your family members can pay a ransom and you can go home, you can go free. Or unconditional release, meaning you can just go home, they just let you free for no reason, with no condition. Or the condition could be, if you know how to read and write, then you can teach 10 Muslims to read and write, and you can go free. So if this is not showing the importance of education in Islam, then I don't know what is. And then we have all other kinds of phrases and sentences that encourage seeking knowledge, seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. Imam Ahmad, one of the great scholars of Islam, he always walked around with his pen and the container of ink, the mihbara. And they would ask him, you're always holding your container, the pen and the ink. And he said, مَعَ الْمِحْبَرَ إِلَى الْمِقْبَرَ. So with this, the pen and the ink, until I go to the grave. And we're constantly learning constantly learning new things. And the ink of a scholar is more valued than the blood of the martyr, and so on and so forth. So all these are just basic teachings that already were there, and they encourage people to seek knowledge. So the Abbasids weren't doing anything that was really outside of the box, but this was to a degree the norm. So we said they established Bayt al-Hikmah, this house of wisdom in Baghdad, and they would bring works of all different parts of the world, and they would translate them into Arabic. One of the contemporary historians, he estimated the amount that a translator was paid in those days, and he said it's the equivalent of what an athlete is paid here in our times now. So that means they really paid a lot of money, which means they also gave a lot of importance to knowledge and seeking knowledge. The governments in the Islamic State would pay scholars to teach students. And they would also give a stipend, like a salary, to the students of knowledge as well, because where are they going to provide for themselves from? So all this shows you how the government gave so much care and attention to education. And since we're on that point, that is one of the goals of the Islamic government. The Islamic government cares about a lot of things. But it's unfortunate that we don't know how to market that. Yeah? And we always talk about when you have the Sharia rule, most people, even Muslims, when you say the word Sharia, what do they think of? What do you think of when someone says Sharia? Exactly. You think of cutting off with a hand. And someone cuts off a hand and the hand runs away. That's what you think of when you hear the Sharia. Even Muslims, that's what they think of. And that's how Muslims sell the Sharia. 2 years ago, one of the Muslim presidents, he got on television and he said, yes, we're going to bring the Sharia. We're going to cut off hands. We're going to cut off feet. Who wants Sharia? You don't even want to put your hand up. You might cut it off. So it makes it look like it's such a violent state. But that's very poor marketing, and that's not all there is there. There's so much good in the Islamic system, meaning from how the orphans will be taken care of, the widows will be taken care of, there will be no bribery, there will be no injustice, it will be safe, the streets will be safe, the poor will be fed. All these are aspects. So it's really unfair when you represent an entire system of government by just the scary part, which is the punishment. And that's like saying, the analogy we give is like if there's a beautiful palace, gorgeous palace, but around this palace is the fence. The boundaries are scary. Maybe there's razor wire, electric fence, maybe there's some vicious dogs. This is around the boundary. But no one in their right mind would judge the beauty of the palace by how scary the boundary is around the palace. Would that make sense? Wouldn't make any sense to say it must be a horrible palace because this gate looks scary. And the dog there looks ugly. Doesn't make sense. So realistically, the boundaries of Allah, they're meant to be scary, so you don't come near them. But the religion itself is beautiful. And we always say that in a democracy, for example, in America, where I'm from, we have a democracy, and in that democracy, we have capital punishment. We kill people in 3 ways. The state, the government does that. By lethal injection, or electric chair, or gas chamber. But you never heard any American president trying to sell democracy to the world by talking about the death punishments. So we're going to bring democracy. We're going to put people in the gas chamber. We're going to burn people in the electric chair. I'm doing Barack Obama. Thank you. Yes, you're supposed to laugh. Yes, it was very good. Yes, thank you. So we're saying that these are the things that the Islamic State cared about. And they paid teachers, and they even paid the students. And it was just a general atmosphere of encouraging knowledge. We said they were not afraid to get knowledge from other nations, translate that work, and build upon it and improve upon it. And that's why they would bring translation. They would translate works on science, philosophy, medicine, education, and China. Paper comes from China, and it's immediately welcomed, and they start to use that, and that made a big difference now. So easier than papyrus, which breaks after it gets dried and the ink doesn't really stick or absorb it. And so paper, when you write with it with ink, the ink is absorbed into the paper. So that was a better medium, and they started to have books. And there were fantastic libraries in Baghdad, which we're going to talk about later on, inshallah. And whatever they got that was good from another nation or another peoples, they would immediately take it and build upon it. So from India, they got the decimal system. And it was the man by the name of Al-Khwarizmi is the person that took the decimal system, and he popularized it basically, and he worked with it. So it's something that came from India, accepted immediately, and worked with. Medicine, again, they built upon the works of the Greeks, the Romans, and the Persians, and what they have done and discovered with medicine, and they kept going further with that. So Ibn Sina is one of the names that stand out when it comes to medicine, and he wrote his book, The Canon of Medicine, which for many years remained one of the most important books or documents or sources when it comes to medicine. And they built hospitals. And the hospitals in the beginning, they used to close at night. So then they passed a law, this was about in the 10th century, they passed a law that hospitals should remain open 24 hours and never close. And they made another law that even if you don't have money, you'll be allowed into the hospital. You'll be treated, everyone will be treated. Now I know when I say that in Sweden, everyone's like, oh, whatever. But when I say that in America, people are like, wow, really? Because in America you pay for everything. If you go to the emergency room for just well, you can't go for 1 hour. If you have any problem, you go to the emergency room, you sit there for at least 4 hours, it's a good day, or you sit for 6 hours, and they sometimes will misdiagnose you and send you a bill for $8,000. This is where you say, oh. Yeah, shocking, isn't it? You guys pay here for healthcare? You don't. And in the UK, you don't. And in Canada, you don't. In America, it's horrible. But don't tell anyone I said that. So these are things that were available at that time. Some places don't have it today, yeah? And building hospitals and taking care of people, that, as we said, this is part of the philosophy of the Islamic State. The second caliph, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he was concerned about so many different things. And building hospitals, building roads, even when they're going to build a road, they try to choose a road that does not have many ups and downs, no hills in between. They try to make everything easy and simple for people. And he used to think of all kinds of things, like for example, in the old days they would mint the gold coins, and there would be just different weights, and they didn't have a standardized weight for the coin. And during his time they made it standardized. He also standardized the dira', which is the arm's length. So if I tell you, build me a bed that's 4 arms length. So okay, your arms are different than my arms. I'm a short guy, and like I said, maybe you're Somali, so your arm's length is like this long, and then you build me this bed that's like for 5 people, you know? So he actually standardized the arm's length. What will be the length of an arm's length? It fixed certain things like that. They would build hospitals, mosques, but realistically the center of the Muslim city was the mosque. And the way they would establish and build and design a new city during the reign of Umar, and I know this is a little bit before the golden age that we're talking about, but it was a golden age in its own right. They would have a man stand in the middle of this open area where they're going to build a new city, and he would shoot arrows in different directions. Now, the arrows typically land within the same distance. The middle where he shoots from, that will be the center of the new city, the center of town. And what structure will they build in the middle of town? Take a guess. Absolutely, they'll build the mosque there. Yeah, and so the Islamic city was built upon, or with the center of it was the mosque, and from the mosque everything else happened. And it wasn't like how it is a lot of times today when you go to Muslim countries. The mosque is just a place of prayer. So they lock it, they open it up at time of prayer, you pray, and you leave, and it's locked again. But it was the center of the city, and that's why if you look at the architecture of modern cities, all the roads lead to downtown. All the roads from all over are coming to downtown. When you get to downtown, what do you find? You find either shopping malls, or you find the central business district, or you find sometimes just all the roads lead to one big statue of the founder of the country, something like that. But in the Muslim city, it was designed around the mosque. And then they would pick locations to build hospitals. And this is in the old days, but they had some very creative ways. Where's the best place to build a hospital? So they would take pieces of meat, and they would put them in different parts of this town or this area. It's not a town yet. And then they would visit them after a number of days. And the last piece of meat to rot, that's the place to build the hospital. And it still makes sense. I mean, it would make sense for that time, and it still makes sense because, as you know, for meat to rot or for the right conditions for bacteria and other things, it depends on humidity, the amount of wind, it depends on how dry it is, all these things. So the place where the meat would rot the last, that's where they would build the hospital. So it's not a new idea that the Abbasids are building hospitals and keeping them open. This was happening as early as the reign of Umar radiallahu anhu, who became the Khalifa about 2 years after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. And they had mental institutions as well. So, and they established awqaf, which are like charitable foundations, and the money went from them to support schools and to support the hospitals. So, and then they had like, in the year 859, Al-Qayrawan, which even the Guinness Book of World Records, it lists Al-Qayrawan as the oldest learning institution that offers a degree. The first learning institution that would offer a degree was established in Al-Qayrawan. And so from there, they studies with astronomy, trigonometry, everything. And I'll tell you something interesting. In those days, if someone was studying religion only, if someone wanted to become a scholar or an imam or something like that, they were actually made to study mathematics and astronomy as well. They had to study math and astronomy. Who can make a guess? Why would they have to study math? You're going to become an imam, lead salah in the masjid and what have you. Why math? Yes?
Maybe to count how many rak'ah you have to pray.
To count how many rak'ahs you're in. 3 plus 1. If he doesn't know math, 3 plus 1, 5. 5 rak'ah. Inheritance, right? Because inheritance, you deal with fractions and percentages and what she gets 1/6 of his wealth. And his wealth is 340. But what's 1/6 of that? So they had to learn math, actually. And they had to learn astronomy because of, the direction of the Qibla, which is direction towards Mecca, using the stars, also understanding the months, when it's the lunar month of Ramadan, all these things. So they were educated people. And back then, people respected Islamic knowledge, which is exactly the opposite of what's happening today. Today, if you study Islamic knowledge, it's not regarded as real knowledge. One of my friends in America, his wife goes to an Islamic university. And his parents would always ask him, when is your wife going to study and go to school, university? And he would tell them, she's already going to school. And they would say, no, real education. So if you're studying Islam, that's not real. Real, I mean economics and physics, that's real. Yeah? And this is the attitude we have today. I was giving an example of one Muslim country, which we're not going to name. But in that country, your degree and your career really is decided based on your high school degree. What do you get in high school? When you finish high school, what do you call it here? We have in UK GCSE, it's SATs in America. What are they called here? The high school exams when you finish. You don't have it, mashallah. I want to raise my children here so they have an easy life. Excellent. So, anyways, in normal countries where they have it, I'm just kidding. Your degree, if you get an A, you can go into medicine. You can get into anything you want. But if you get a C, you can't go into medicine. It's determined by your final grade. You get a B, you can study economics, you can study this kind of chemistry, physics. But if you get D, C's and stuff, you have less and less school and less options. And if you're an absolute failure and a good-for-nothing loser, and you get F's and D's and C minuses, and you're so sad, no school will accept me, they tell you, cheer up. There is one thing that you can study. Islam. Islamic studies. And so now, in the old days, if people noticed that a child was very intelligent, they would tell the parents, take care of him, let him, encourage him in his studies because he would be a great benefit for this nation, for this ummah. And now, in that country specifically, you get the worst grades, and they're like, okay, so let's put all the dumbest people and get them to learn the religion. Let them then try to tell people what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, halal, haram, and all that. So, completely different philosophy there. And they would actually give high, in education, in educational systems, they would give high positions to whoever was qualified. So there were Jews who had very high positions in educational centers, and Christians who had very high positions as well, and they were well paid. It was all about the knowledge, and it wasn't about where it came from initially, and it wasn't about who knows it best. It was about the knowledge itself. And so this allowed a lot of great thinkers and great scientists to develop. And we'll just take a few names, and just as examples. One of the examples is Ibn al-Haytham. And Ibn al-Haytham, his name has been anglicized. In English, he's known as Al-Hazin. Yeah? And his name in Arabic is Ibn al-Haytham. And Ibn al-Haytham, he has what is known as the Book of Optics. And this book remained the most important book on the topic for 700 years. Until 700 years later, Johann Kepler wrote his book that became more important than it. But for 700 years, this was the #1 book. And he came up with, back then people were debating, how do you see? How does your eye work? How can you see things? And they had two theories, the intromission theory and the emission theory. And the emission theory says that light, and the belief originally was that the Greek goddess of fire, or of light, she lit a fire in the human eye. And so what happens when you see something, light shoots out of your eye into that object, and that's how you're able to see it. And the intromission theory says that objects come from, or particles come off from the object into your eye, and that's how you're able to see things. Now, if you ever study the scientific method, you'll see that Ibn al-Haytham was one of the people who were responsible for formulating the scientific method. Because not only did he argue logically against these theories, but he also set up experiments to disprove these theories. And some of his arguments were, if light shot out of my eye, like a flashlight, I forgot the word, what did we say flashlight was? Huh?
Blixt.
No?
Blixt?
Blixt?
Yeah.
That's flashlight?
Yeah.
Like, Jamil.
Okay.
So if light came out of your eyes like blixt, yeah, then I would be able to, if I'm standing in the light, look at something in the dark, and I'll be able to see it. If I'm standing in a light room and there's a dark room over there, and I put my flashlight on it, I'll be able to see the item. So he, through this experiment, said it can't be that light comes out of the eye. Then he argued also logically. He said that it would be impossible, if light comes out of my eye, that's how I see things, it would be impossible to open your eyes and immediately see the distant stars. Now we know some of these stars are thousands and millions of light years away, but back then they didn't have the exact timing, but they still knew that stars were very far away. So he argued, if light travels from my eye to the star, that's how I see it, how would I see it? The minute I open my eyes, I can see it. And then you would actually, if that were the case, you would open your eyes and then you wouldn't see anything because the light's still moving. And you would stand like this for a year. And our brother's trying to show you something, wait, I'm trying to see the stars, okay? I've been here for a long time. But it wasn't like that. So he argued like that. And he set up also experiments to show that light travels in a straight line and many other interesting things. And that's why for 700 years, his book was the most important when it comes to optics. And he shattered some of the theories of Ptolemy and Aristotle and some of the known Greek writers. Then we have Abu Bakr al-Razi, and what he did was he established he discovered that there's a relationship between bacteria and infections. If there's any kind of wound, any kind of like minor surgery that was taking place, sometimes it would get infected. People didn't know why, and he discovered that there was a relationship between bacteria and that. So he actually invented the antiseptic, something to put over the wound to kill the germs, to kill the bacteria, to prevent infection. And of course, obviously there's more detail, there are more people. There was Ibn Nafis who discovered that there is something called the circulatory system, that blood circulates the body through this system, and it's pumped by the heart and so on and so forth. There was Al-Jahid who, in those days, described evolution actually. Everyone with me? Yeah? Described evolution, meaning evolution, not the one that, that you're a monkey became a human, but evolution, or actually adaptation, that animals adapt and they evolve and they change based on the environment and so on and so forth. Umar al-Khayyam had a calendar. He put forth a 500-year long calendar that was only off by one day, so it's pretty accurate. And so on and so forth. Now, a lot of times when you discuss and I understand that in Sweden now from August until November, there's going to be the display of the golden age of Islam, correct? Is it coming to this great city?
Not to the city. No.
Stockholm, they get on the... Actually, it's not even in Stockholm, is it? Right now it's in the city, starts with an S. Can't remember. Nobody knows. Sweden, man. It's a one-way conversation, huh? In America, one of the reasons why they have white churches and black churches isn't really racism. There may be a little bit of that, but it's not really about racism. The reason they have white and black churches is that blacks, they like to converse in a different way. So when the preacher is speaking, especially if you go to like a Baptist church or something, you've probably seen this in the movies. The preacher is speaking, and look how you guys are, mashallah, saying like this. And people are just jumping up and down and yelling things back to him, and he says things, they say things back, and he yells back at them, and like that. And the white church is all quiet. You talk too much of, who's this guy? You know? There's actually in New Orleans, in America, there's an African American community that it's a big community, but they all almost all of them just came into Islam quickly like that. So they have a mosque there, a masjid. And you know, for the Muslims, on Friday, the Friday prayer, when the Imam is giving the lecture or his sermon, you don't speak at all. But they just recently come into Islam, there's a big number of them. So while the Imam is giving the Jum'ah khutbah, they're yelling things to him. You tell him, Imam! And he's yelling things back. One time I was lecturing in the UK, and in the UK also, people are, mashallah, very stoic, you know. So, and like, no one's reacting. So in the end, I told the brothers the story, just to get them all excited. So like 1 hour later, I said something, and there was an Afghani brother in the audience, and he goes, you tell them, Imam. Thank you for trying, but that's not how you do it. You yell, yeah? Excellent. Okay, I'm trying to wrap up now. Am I going over already? How are we doing?
No.
No? Good. It's interesting that a lot of times you find a lot of the world is not aware of the debt to Islamic society when it comes to a lot of the sciences. Many people are not aware of that. And you'll just find a few books that are few and far between about the debt to Islamic society or what the Muslim scientists brought. One of the reasons behind that is that when there were the Crusades between the West, and if you want to say the East or the Muslim lands, the Crusades created this type of animosity, so that after the Crusades, when a Western scientist, if he borrowed from a Muslim scientist, he didn't give him the credit. You understand? He did not reference his work by saying this was the work of Al-Khwarizmi or this was the work of why? Because we were just at war with these people a while ago and there was still bad blood. So I don't have to give any credit. One of the contemporary historians, he looked at one of the works of one of the Western scientists and he found that it was actually copied word for word from another Muslim scientist. Word for word copied. But he didn't give him credit. Why should I give him credit? They were just fighting us during the Crusades a while ago. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are oblivious to all the efforts and the contributions of the Muslim empire. So now, this golden age ends around the 12th century. And we want to look at what are some of the theories as to why it ended. What happened? And there are a number of theories, and we're just going to go over them. The first one is that after the collapse of the Abbasids, the Seljuk Turks came and they took charge. And there's one accusation that the theologians, the religious people, the theologians started to talk negatively about all these methods and all these methods of deduction and methods. And so they were speaking against all that. And then from there on, the atmosphere and the excitement about education started to decrease. But a lot of historians actually doubt that's what happened, and they say it's not very accurate, and nor is it very fair. And the other theory says it was a combination of the Crusades from the 11th to the 12th century, and that caused it, or the Crusades along with the Mongols. And some actually approximate the date of the collapse or the end of the Golden Age to 1258, the year 1258 specifically. Why? Because in 1258 is when the Mongols entered the city of Baghdad and they sacked Baghdad. They basically destroyed it and killed people in the hundreds of thousands, and it was for 40 nights and 40 days just murdering people left and right. Horrendous part of history. And what happened is they moved immediately into the library in Baghdad that had all decades of the classical works of scholars in religion or in sciences. All these books that were there were taken and they were dumped into the Euphrates River. They put so many books into this river that they were used as a bridge. You imagine a huge river, and you put so many books from the library into this river that now the horses could pass over these books from one side of the river to the other. The eyewitnesses said the water of the Euphrates River became black. So the water is running like this, and he goes through these books and he goes through the pages and it takes and dilutes and takes away the ink, and the water became black from the amount of ink and books that were poured into it. So sometimes you're reading the biography of one of the great imams. For example, when you study the biography of Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah, you'll see that he wrote 200 books. But how many books do we have from him today? 4 or 6 books. What happened to the other 200 some? They were destroyed in Baghdad. So many great scholars had fantastic works, were all destroyed by the Mongols. So some people, they say if you could approximate the date of the end of the Golden Age, it was during when the Mongols entered. It's quite accurate in the sense that it never shot up to that level again. Yeah. So that's another theory. And another one is what the scholars say now about the decline that the Muslim Ummah or the Muslim nations are experiencing. And they say that something that's specific to the Muslims is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala linked our economic and worldly success to our level of religiosity. That Allah put a link between these two things. And you see this in the Quran, and you see this in history as well. So, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for example, وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ الْقُرَىٰ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَرَكَاتٍ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And if the people of the village had believed and feared Allah, we would have opened for them from the blessings of the heavens and the earth. So it was contingent upon that they're in here, internally, they're okay. They believe and they're obedient to Allah, and then Allah will give them from the blessings. Because people might say, well, I've seen nations that they don't care about God or Allah, and they're okay economically. Yes, because for our nation, that was the link. Yeah, that was the link. And many other verses like that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. Now, of course, this verse, if you read this tafsir, it's actually talking about people being in a good state, and that good state won't change to a bad state until internally they change back to a bad state. Yeah. But the scholars also say it's reversible, this verse. Meaning, if you're in a bad state, to change it to a good state, you also have to change yourself internally. And this is why during the reign of Umar ibn Khattab, the second caliph, he used to have his generals send him detailed journals of the spiritual condition of the soldiers. The spiritual condition. Because he linked victory to that. Yeah? And that's why, and they were following the spiritual condition of the Muslim soldier. And that's why you never ever find in Muslim history that a Muslim soldier raped a woman or murdered someone or murdered a child or they killed the family, the things that we hear now in the news. Never. Because they had a code of conduct and they were monitored for their level of religiosity. And this was also what happened, since we mentioned the Mongols, this is how Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, a great scholar of Islam, how he helped get rid of the Mongols. He first realized that we're not in the state that will assist in getting rid of the Mongols. So first thing he sat and he began to teach people their religion. Then they went and they resisted the Mongols, the invasion. Likewise in a verse, and I'll end with this, inshallah. How are we doing?
10 minutes.
10? This is a verse in Surah An-Nur, which is chapter 24 in the Quran, the light. And in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes a promise, a wa'ad. Wa'ad in Arabic means promise. But the definition of wa'ad in Arabic, a wa'ad is a promise of a good condition with a stipulation at the end. So something good will happen, but you have to do something. So Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَعَمَلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ كَمَا اسْتَخْلَفَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. وَعَدَ اللَّهُ, Allah makes this promise of good to come in the future with a stipulation. Yeah? And we'll get to the stipulation at the end. Allah promises those who believe from amongst you. But not just believe and do good deeds. Yeah? That door is interesting, huh? Believe and do good deeds. It's not enough to just believe. Iblis believes. Shaitan believes. He knows there's a God. So it's not enough to say, yes, I believe. I was telling him yesterday, I met this Muslim one time. He was drunk and stoned. And he said, I'm drunk and I'm stoned, but I believe. That's some useless belief right there. So it's not enough to just believe and just, I'm Muslim, I've got my ID card here. See Muhammad Ahmad. It's not like that. Those who believe and do good deeds, لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Istakhlif, like the word khalifa, which means that they will be the successors of the earth. They will be in charge. Yeah? كَمَا اسْتَخْلَفَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ, as he made those before them in charge. So, and some scholars say this like how some of the prophets had complete control in the past. وَلِيُمَكِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ دِينَهُمُ الَّذِي ارْتَضَى لَهُم. So look at this promise. So first, they'll have the dominion or the sovereignty on the earth, and then their religion will be firm on earth. Yeah, yeah, so the religion will be firm on earth, and then وَلِيُبَدِّلَنَّهُم مِّن بَعْدِ خَوْفِهِمْ أَمْنًا. And Allah will remove and replace the state of fear that we used to live in with a state of security. Fantastic promises, aren't they? Then here comes the stipulation, the shart, the condition. يَعْبُدُونَنِي لَا يُشْرِكُونَ بِي شَيْئًا. They worship me and they do not associate anything in worship with me, which is known as shirk in Islam, which is the greatest sin, is when you worship something else along with Allah, or you worship something instead of Allah. Anytime you bow down, you genuflect, you make dua, you supplicate to anything besides God, this is known as shirk, and it is the biggest sin. And those of you who are of Christian background, you know this from the Old Testament. Constantly, God is, and the correct word is, threatens people to never worship something besides Him. So now we're the ummah of Tawheed, we're the ummah of La ilaha illallah, of the oneness of God, that there's only one God. And how much shirk, how many graves are being worshipped, how many things are being called upon instead of Allah in our ummah right now. In just one country, there were 5,000 graves that were worshipped besides Allah. One Muslim country. And this is true in so many Muslim countries. Thousands of graves that are worshipped besides Allah. Mosques that have graves inside them, all kinds of things. This is prohibited for our ummah. And this goes exactly against who we are, and it's in the thousands, it's rampant. And so how can we expect to move forward if we don't fix ourselves religiously as well? And if it's not that type of shirk, associating others in worship with Allah, it's other forms of it. People hanging amulets, having these little things, you tell you take this, stick it under the desk and this will happen, and take that and write with it and you will get a miracle. All kinds of nonsense. People's hearts attached to things besides Allah. I was talking about that little Quran, you may have seen it. It's a small mushaf, small Quran, it's like this big. Tiny. Tiny, like you've seen it? Yeah? And sometimes it's even sold with a magnifying glass. It's like incredibly tiny, like this big. Who's this jerk who's going to get a magnifying glass? Just get a big one, okay? No? So, what's that for? It's small and compact, so you can stick it places. You can put it in the glove compartment, and it will magically protect your car. You can put it under your baby's pillow, and it'll protect your baby from harm. You know, when I always teach da'wah techniques, let me give you a quick da'wah technique, because we like the quick ones, right? So let's say I go to a family that just gave birth to a baby, and they put the little Quran under the baby's pillow to protect the baby from harm. Here's a quick and efficient da'wah technique to prove to them that it's not protecting the baby. Come into their house and smack the baby. They will convince them that it doesn't work. Yeah. Okay, for those of you who are frowning at me, I'm joking. Okay? Some of you are like, okay. Alright, so then what does this mean for you? What does this mean to you? What can we walk away with this? First of all, I want to talk about how a lot of people say, oh, the problem with the Muslim Ummah is that there's not enough money. That's not true. The most cash-rich area in the world is where? It's not America. America's all credit. We don't have real money. The most cash-rich area in the world is? The Middle East. Absolutely, the Middle East. Okay, so it's not about cash and money. There's cash and money in the Ummah. What is it about? Brains? The problem with this Ummah is that we have no brains. We're all stupid. Resources? Yeah? You know, we do have brains. Just let me stick on the brains for a minute. We have a lot of brains. Yeah? And you find brilliant surgeons and scientists and mathematicians all over that are Muslim, and you'll find them in the West most likely. I'll give you a chance in a second. In America, for example, NASA, if you ever talk to anyone who works at NASA, NASA is just loaded with Pakistani and Iraqi and Arab and all these kinds of scientists inside. But of course, you don't see them. Maybe they're not very camera friendly. So whenever the rover lands on Mars, the white guy comes. Yes, the rover landed on Mars. And all these Arabs are inside. They're like, that was my idea. Now he come on the television. Anyways, I want to say two things, yeah? Number one, we're not just one of those people who just wallow in the past. Well, in the past we had this. So what about the future? And with that, I would like to give a quick reminder, but seeing as a lot of your university students, you probably don't need this reminder, but there is this phenomenon where if young men and women start to become religious, the first thing they start to push aside is education. Oh, this is just worldly education. Allah's not going to ask me about physics on the Day of Judgment. True, but you can use physics on this earth to do something to advance the ummah, to move it forward. It could be your local community, it could be your country, your nation. And when I say your country, I mean Sweden, I don't mean Afghanistan. Because this is where you're from. And I love how someone will be born and raised in Sweden, and he'll be like, I'm from Pakistan. Really? Have you ever been there? No. What makes you Pakistani? Because you eat curry? I eat curry too, I'm not Pakistani. So, or a Somali guy, oh, I'm from Somalia. No, you're not. Swedish. What do you know about Somalia? I eat bananas. So what? I eat bananas. By the way, they said they're going to rename Somalia to Banana Republic. Hey, any Somalis in the room? You know, I always say this, man. Somalis are the greatest people in the world, right after the Sudanese people. But they are the greatest people in the world. All right. And you know something? The early Muslims, whatever they excelled in, they use that to move their society forward. Yeah? If you're rich, you use that, you use your money to move forward. And like I was saying yesterday, you can take your money with you to the next life if you want. You just have to convert it to a currency that is acceptable there, to reward. Yeah? So now if you're going from Sweden to spend a weekend or so in Germany, your Swedish crowns, you change them to a currency that's acceptable in Germany. Right? You convert it, you can take it with you. Same way you can take your house, you can take your car, you can take your education, just convert it to a currency that will work in the next life, which is ajr, which is reward. And so, in the end, I'd like to say everyone has a role to play. And everyone, it's up to you to find your role to play in this ummah. And some people think you just have to be a speaker. No, you don't have to do that. It's like an engine. Every component is important. You know, when I was a young man many years ago, I had this moped, this motorcycle. I used to love it. I used to wash it every 2 hours. Every 2 hours. This was after it was dusty. So every 2 hours I wash it again. And I used to take it apart every day. I would take the carburetor apart and I would clean it and I'd close it and put it back together. Tomorrow I do the same thing. I take the carburetor and it's still clean. I clean it again and put it back together. One day I said, let me go deeper and take more things apart. So I took the piston apart, and I took the piston itself, and there was a stupid ring around the piston. So this is garbage. I broke it when I took it out. It's just this thin ring around the piston. Those of you who understand mechanics, you know what I'm talking about, and you know how foolish I'm becoming, right? I broke it, and I remember saying to myself, it's just a stupid ring. I just put it there. And of course, 2 years, that motorcycle never started up again. Because of that little thing. So everyone is important. When in an engine, every little component is important. Take this one little thing out, engine is this big. Take this little thing out, it's not going to work. So see yourself as part of an engine. Don't ever see yourself as, I'm not an important component. What can you do to help your community, to help your society, to help your ummah? Based on whatever talent Allah gave you, and everyone has some kind of talent in this room. Find a way to utilize that and to help your religion and to help your people and to help your nation move forward, inshallah. With that, I'll close because I know I'm going overboard. I'd like to talk to you about why I'm here to begin with in Sweden. Who's heard of Al-Maghrib Institute? Al-Maghrib Institute, fantastic. Here's the fantastic and great news. Al-Maghrib Institute is now coming to Sweden, alhamdulillah. Yes, that's the part when you say, ooh. Yes. In November will be the first course ever. It's coming to Stockholm. And the Malmo Institute, basically, it's an Islamic university. It's not online. The instructor comes to your town. does an intensive course. It could be single weekend or double weekend. All day Saturday, all day Sunday. Then he leaves, then you take the exam, and it goes towards your degree. We're all over the world now, from multiple cities in America and Canada and the UK. But now we're in Singapore, we're in the Philippines, we're in Malaysia, and we're even in Dubai. And it's about time that the Maghrib Institute comes to Sweden. So many people speak English here, mashallah. We've got about up to 80,000 students worldwide. And they're all learning their religion. And we just had our first group of graduated like a few months ago. They got their degrees in Islamic studies. Material that will come detailed, relevant to you. The instructor will come to your town, give the class, you take the exam. So finally it's here, it's in town, and that's why that's part of the reason why I'm part of this tour. So for those who are interested, you talk to the crew there. There's the Brother G-Money over there, Brother Rizan here. So those, I call him G-Money, that's not his name. So the brothers there, if you're interested, find out more information. It's also almaghrib.org. And you can find out, you click on your country, you find out when the next course is coming, what's the course after that. And if you want it to come to your city, all you have to do is put together a team, and it'll come to your city as well. All right, so with that, I end. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you for having me. Sallallahu barak ala Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.